talking a lot in the last couple of videos around two of the really the critical components of, quote unquote, thinking better that I think of. One being the ability to question and think rationally and logically and be objective, right? So you can kind of identify the flaws in your thinking. You can identify your blind spots, right? That's critical to do that. And then the second piece, which is the mental toughness to actually accept what you find, right, when you do that questioning, and then actually do the unbelievably hard work to fix it and do something about it. To me, those are the two key components, right? You need those two, critical. What I'm starting to realize, though, maybe somewhat ironically, is that for most people, myself very much included, that mental toughness piece, though, is interesting because often that's one of the biggest blind spots. As I talk to people and as I reflect on myself, I find more and more that so many of us believe we have the mental toughness. We take that almost as a given. We take it for granted that we have that. Sure, of course I have the mental toughness. If there's something about me that's not right, or some issue that I have, or some inconvenient truth, sure, yeah, I would see it, and I identify it, and I accept it, and I would fix it, because that's what you should do. And I have the toughness to do that. We all want to believe that. We want to believe we have that toughness. But most of us don't, or at least I should speak for myself, right? I don't in many cases, or I haven't. I'm trying to build it. But we don't know it, right? And again, that's the irony, that the blind spot that we're searching for with logic often is that mental toughness piece. And that's problematic because it really can inhibit you from making progress, from thinking better. And it's also somewhat counterintuitive in that I think for many people, you hear the term mental toughness, you think about it, even in the way in which I talk about it. If you're dealing with an issue, and for me, one of my biggest issues is always my ability to kind of control my emotions and keep calm and handle myself when things don't go right, when they don't go the way I want them to go. Frankly, to not throw temper tantrums as a grown man when things aren't going my way. That's something I struggle with. And for a long time, perhaps I just totally dismissed it, right? It was a blind spot. But then I started to recognize it. But then that mental toughness issue comes in, where I didn't want to admit to myself that it was actually that big of a deal, right? I wanted to believe I had the mental toughness to do something about it if I had to, but I justified it. I had excuses for it as to why it wasn't that big of a deal. But I didn't acknowledge that. So the counterintuitive piece is, what you tend to think is, well, you just need to be stronger. You just need to muscle through it, right? Mental toughness. Force yourself to increase the mental toughness and fix this issue. But it doesn't work that way, right? Again, it doesn't work that way because our mind's almost playing like a trick on us. It's telling us like, no, you're mentally tough enough. If this was a problem, you would fix it. The issue isn't mental toughness. The issue is it's not really a problem. And you believe that. And you say, okay, so check on mental toughness. All's good here. Nothing that needs to be done. But that's not the truth, right? So what I started to realize is that as critical as mental toughness is, right? And all else equal, if we were able to be honest with ourselves about our level of mental toughness, you'd say, okay, I'll just build up that skill and that's the answer. But what's interesting is I think the way you need to account for that when your mind is tricking you in that way and telling you like, yeah, you have the mental toughness, that's not the issue. It really is the logic. It's logical thinking. And the way I always refer to it is I compare it to like math, right? Figurative math that our mind's always doing. And I do that for a reason. Because, logic, math is so clean, it's so obvious, right? It's so easy to see when you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. You can't hide from it. You can't make excuses. It's not subjective. It's objective. So if you're doing a math equation and you're doing it wrong and you're miscalculating it, you will see it. The answer will not be right. You can check your work and see, shit, I messed something in this up. So you bring that back to this idea of mental toughness and us not being aware that we don't have the mental toughness. The antidote to that, the cure to that is logic, is that mathematical, quote unquote, type thinking. Because when your mind is trying to trick you and trying to tell you that you have it and whatever the story is you're telling yourself, when you lay all the information out logically, when you really probe and question and force yourself to look at it in a very logical chain, like, well, this is happening and that's happening, and why am I doing that? Well, I don't have an answer to why I'm doing that, or I don't have an answer to why this is okay, or if I'm really being honest with myself, well, it's incomplete, and that's obvious, just like a math equation. My work is not done. It can't be that everything's fine here because I don't have all the answers. So that logic piece, that mathematical thinking, in many ways, that's the thing that overrides that lack of mental toughness, right? Initially, it allows us to recognize I'm not as mentally tough as I think I am. So for all of us, again, myself very much included, when I have those moments where I want to believe it's not a mental toughness issue, again, counterintuitively perhaps, the answer isn't to get tougher. The answer isn't to muscle through it. The answer is to step back and be logical, be mathematical, and say, let me break this down piece by piece, because that will tell me the true answer. And then at that point, I can bring the mental toughness and actually apply it and use it, right? And start to build that up and use it as needed. But that logic, that mathematical thinking, you can't hide from that. You can't trick that, or at least it's much, much harder. So that becomes, again, the two go hand in hand so much. They're both so critical. You can't really have one without the other. And this is just an example of that.